Natural Habitat Adventures is pleased to be bringing you this online presentation, River of Wine, a paddling tour of Portugal, presented by Nancy Moore. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about Nancy before I turn it over to her. Nancy's appetite for adventure was fed at a very young age by her grandmother, who would orchestrate weekend drives into the New England countryside. She suffers from permanent wanderlust. Nancy's passion for outdoor adventures, especially on the water, eventually led to a degree in environmental studies, years as a sailing instructor, and as a member of the National Ski Patrol. She has more recently enjoyed longer sails up the eastern seaboard, is an American Canoe Association certified sea kayaking instructor, and is also certified as a wilderness first responder. And there's a lot more interesting information about Nancy, but I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about herself as we turn it over to her. So welcome, Nancy.
Thanks very much, Lee. Appreciate it. So there I am, happier than a pig in you know what, actually, sitting in the Duoro River. Thanks again for the introduction. As Lee pointed out, I've had the good fortune to travel and lead trips and paddle in many wonderful and beautiful places, but I'm simply in love with Portugal and this trip, and truly grateful to have the opportunity to share more about it with everyone on the call. It would be a mistake for me if I didn't give credit where credit is due. While I've been leading the trip for over a decade, my first trip to the Douro Valley was actually about 4 or 5 days after 9/11. This is Vitor Ventura, who first created the trip with Olaf Malver, the Chief Exploratory Officer of NatHab Expeditions, about 15 years ago. Vitor continues to be my partner in crime, so to speak, taking a break from his day job on the staff of the Portuguese American or Luso Americana Foundation to lead from the ground. And we both share not only a passion for the region, but an interest in continuous improvement, which is to say that we continue to seek out new places and experiences to build on the quality of the trip. I think you can probably tell from this picture that we're also pretty fond of working together. This is Pedro, and for the past 3 years, he's joined us, also on the ground. He's a young entrepreneur from Lisbon. This picture honestly doesn't do him justice. He's always got a smile on his face, and for that matter, he's rarely standing still. So those folks on the line that know NatHab know that while the focus of the majority of NatHab trips is wildlife or natural history, the focus of this trip is really cultural history. It's exploring the old world life and rich tradition of agriculture, pork production, and winemaking in what is the oldest demarcated wine region on the planet by kayak, because kayaks provide us with a unique and stunning vantage point. It continues to amaze me still that we have the river pretty much all to ourselves. We rarely see boats on the river. Occasionally we'll see another tour boat, and most of the folks on those tour boats wish they were in kayaks instead. So the trip also includes an exploration of some of the oldest Paleolithic etchings on the planet, with the discovery of more than 5,000 etchings just off the river, more than 25,000 years old. So this is a map of the region. On the far left, you'll see Porto in northern Portugal, where the trip begins. But we actually transit by train up the Douro, all the way to the far right, where the Douro forms the border between Spain and Portugal, and then paddle our way west, ending in the heart of what is the port and winemaking region of about 250,000 acres in a town called Pinhão. The demarcated region, which is outlined on this map, is darker and has some dots, and where we spend the majority of our time has also been recognized by UNESCO precisely because it's the oldest demarcated region on the planet. And it was demarcated actually back in 1750 or so. They recognized the specialness of the region very, very early on, even though they've been making wine there since pre-Roman times. So this is the city center of Porto, another one of the UNESCO heritage sites we explore on the trip. Our hotel, the beautiful Infante Sagres, is about a half a block off this center. So those people that get the opportunity to spend additional time in Porto, or even the brief time that we're there as part of the trip, will find Porto to be a interesting city. Porto is referred to as the capital, the cultural capital of Portugal. So named because of its tremendous contributions to the Portuguese culture and the economy in general, and its role historically. Henry the Navigator, who's probably the most prominent figure in Portugal's era of discovery and expansion, was actually born in Porto. This is a view of Villanova de Gaia, just across the river from Porto. Each and every port producer must maintain cellars in Villanova de Gaia. And in fact, this is a view from our opening dinner at Graham's. Graham's Port is quite well known to a lot of people, and certainly considered to be one of the finest producers of port. This is how port used to make it down the river, down the Douro. These are barco Revelas. And I think it's important to note that when these craft were used, the Douro was a wildly rapid river. So captains holding what looks like that big oar off the back of the stern would wind their way treacherously down, loaded to the gills with these barrels of precious cargo, port wine. Before we head upriver, we not only have an opening dinner at Graham's, but we take a tour of their cellars as well, getting an important overview of the region and the trip, and learning all about how port is made and the different types of port. And that tour also includes a visit to their vintage port cellars, where bottles, as you can see from these dates, have been tucked away for nearly 2 centuries. We'll also wander through those barrels, known as pipes, of still unbottled and aging port. This cellar alone, and as I indicated, every producer is required to have their cellars in Villanova de Gaia. And this particular cellar is larger than a football field. So needless to say, there are lots of pipes and lots of port. And finally, what would be a tour without a tasting? So this is Sandy and Bobby actually from enjoying a tasting with Jackie, who's holding the bottle of port. Jackie is Director of Public Relations for the Symington family, which is one of the largest port producers. Indeed, one of the most important relationships that we've developed over time in the region is with the Symington family, who are the owners of 7 different port companies, many well known to port lovers, including Graham's, Ware's, Dow's, Coburn Martinez, as well as several wines. And I'm proud to say that several of the family members, actual Symington family members, as well as Jackie, have joined us kayaking. And our relationship with the Symington family has enabled us to have access to some of their most stunning quintas upriver. And this is one of those quintas. This is Quinta Vesuvio, arguably the finest producer of vintage port on the planet. Here we are paddling by Vesuvio, with a production dating back to the mid-1500s. Needless to say, they've had a great opportunity to perfect the craft. Here we see a Portuguese woman harvesting grapes. One of the many reasons why we consider this an old world culture is that much of the harvest is still done by hand. There are really 2 reasons behind this. First of all, quality control. It's really believed that there's no substituting for individual pickers as fast as they are, being able to grab the most ripe and ready to go bunches of grapes. The second is that the banks of the Duoro River soar upwards in steep terraces, which are frankly too steep for harvesting by machine. And of course, once they're picked by hand, the grapes are also stomped by hand. Again, something that's quite unique to the region. Here we have the Portuguese workers at Vesuvio stomping grapes in century-old granite lagars. And for many of the finest ports, excuse me, foot stomping is still preferred. It's really felt that the balls of one's feet are the best way to get the tannins out of all those luscious grapes, and that it really contributes to the quality. And they're not the only ones that get to stomp. Here we have a picture of a natural habitat group enjoying their turn in the lagar a few years ago. And this is another Symington family quinta and estate known as Malvados, which is perched high above the river in a small town called Tua. And this is a close-up of Malvados. Here again, because of our relationship with the Symington family, we're sometimes privileged to have lunch there and get a tour of Malvados. We can't promise that lunch. Sometimes we get bumped by the British royal family, honestly. But when we are able to, which they always try to accommodate for us, it's always a tremendous treat. Obviously a beautiful interior and a gorgeous old manor. Now I'd like to give you a bit of the flavor of our accommodations upriver and the wonderful families who have opened their hearts and homes to us on this trip. This is a widow relaxing in a little town of Felgar, our first home away from home upriver. We actually stay in Felgar 2 nights. As you can tell from this and the previous picture, it's a pretty sleepy little adorable town and an old world spot. It's pretty safe to say that when we pull into Felgar, we sometimes get a few side glances from our travelers because at first glance, while it's adorable, they're kind of looking around wondering, how the heck do we get here? And it's not necessarily something that would impress. But a quick walk through a beautiful barn door, and we enter into Casa Cruz, our first home away from home, which is indeed a old farmhouse high up in the mountains in this little town of Felgar, and has been lovingly restored by 2 terrific entrepreneurs, Anna and George. George's family actually had a second home up in Felgar, so that when he was a kid, he just fell in love with the place, and in seeing this old beat-up farmhouse, he clearly had a vision and brought this crumbling century-old spot back to life, making it into a beautiful casa for people to stay. This gives you an inside view of Casa Cruz. The interior of it is just, and George has terrific pictures of the restoration, but I hope you can see from this picture, it's a wonderful mix of the old, beautiful stone and contemporary, and the food, which is lovingly prepared by a young woman named Katia, is just super yummy. This is the second spot that we stay, also for 2 nights, Tadeo's farm. It's in the center of the picture. And and also is situated, as you might be able to tell from the mountains in the background, in a gorgeous little valley. Tadeo's is a 600-hectare organic farm that's been operating for 4 generations from the family of wife Marie's family. And everything we eat while we're at Tadeo's comes from the farm. The best lamb ever, for anybody out there that's a lamb lover. Oranges drizzled with their own olive oil, almonds, preserves, cheese. It honestly just makes my mouth water thinking about it. In fact, we only used to spend one night here, and by popular request, we now spend 2 nights here because people love the farm so much. This is a view from the farmhouse of down to their lovely pool, and you can see a little bit more of the trees and the fields of almonds and olives just beyond the pool. And I think I mentioned a little earlier that the Duoro is not a trip about wildlife, but there is some wildlife. Just in case I left you with the impression that there is no wildlife sighting in the Duoro. This is Layla, one of several meeters and greeters at Tadeo's farm. This is actually one of the farm's shepherds. Tadeos have 2 flocks on their farm, which in addition to being wonderful eating, also provide a tremendous amount of milk for some super yummy sheep's cheeses that we have while we're on the farm. In fact, I've brought some wheels of that cheese home with me to the United States. It's so yummy. And I always bring their olive oil home with me. This is one of the farm's mules, obviously not wild at all. He's going for my fleece, I think. But in fact, mules continue to be used by a lot of farmers in the valley. They're ideal for winding through narrow streets and dirt roads around the valley, and they also happen to be very sure on their feet up and down what can be pretty steep cliffs. And this is the husband. I mentioned that the farm is from Marie's family. This is Cruz, who is Marie's husband, and he's decanting a yummy bottle of vintage port for our enjoyment. In addition to being the proud steward of the farm, he's an architect, and in fact has devoted much of his expertise to the preservation of a lot of old quintas and mills and houses throughout the valley. His work is truly stunning. This is the next home away from home and our newest find, Barrio Lucas. It's perched high. You can't really tell in full except for the lower right corner there, but it's perched really high on a cliff in a little town called Mursa. The owners, Odette and her partner, just again had an amazing vision in creating this place. They turned a bunch of very small, century-old little schist and shale homes and barns into a row of stunning rooms as you go up this hill. It's just really terrific. This will give you an idea of where we have breakfast while we're there. This is from the balcony of one of those little rooms that I was just talking about. Not a bad place to have breakfast. And in fact, right after this picture was taken, which was the very first year we were here, the sprinklers in the lawn went off. And poor Odette realized that she had forgot to turn off the sprinkler system. Fortunately, it didn't ruin the breakfast one iota. And finally, this is certainly last, but certainly not least, is Casa de Lavois, perched high above the town of Pinhao, which is where our paddling ends. From the inside of Casa de Lavois, like the others casas and quintas, you can start to see that this too is a restored farmhouse. And in fact, this farmhouse was built in 1658 and has been in the same family, the Sampaio family, since 1733. And as you can tell from this picture, as well as the dining room here, we're again enjoying a scrumptious meal. It's just stunning and lovingly soaked in the history on the inside and out. But really what attracts folks to this casa more than anything else is the view from the outside. This is standing on that veranda that you just saw a minute ago, looking down at their pool with the grapevines below and the city of Pinhao just below. It's safe to say most of the travelers on this trip are sorry they don't get an extra week just to perch themselves here. It was voted, I think, one of the top 10 views in the world by BBC. So now that we had an opportunity to explore a little bit about our accommodations, and before we get into the kayaking, I thought I'd take a moment to switch gears and talk about what has become a very special part of the trip. Indeed, when we started doing this trip, this piece of it didn't really even exist. This was a break in our days of kayaking midweek to hike and explore the Paleolithic findings of the Fudge River, which is a tributary of the Douro. So what we find there are etchings, not paintings, which some of you might be more familiar with. And as mentioned earlier, the body of them, over 5,000 in total, are recognized to have been created more than 25,000 years ago. This is another UNESCO heritage site of the trip. And in fact, while a handful of the etchings have been known for quite some time, there was a dam that was scheduled to be built, and in fact was started to be built in the Fudge not all that long ago, that was halted because archaeologists started to discover the depth and the breadth of the amount of etchings in the area. So there's now a stunning Fudge museum as well, which we also tour as time permits. This is one of my favorite pictures. This is actually a stream in June. It's part of our Paleolithic hike. Among other things, it gives me an opportunity to talk about the primary difference between the June and September departures. In June, we're blessed by the sprouting of grape bunches and blankets of green and wild mountain flowers, while in September, we're in the grape harvest season. And while I joked a bit before about the wildlife in the Douro with pictures of Layla and others, in all departures, the bird life of the Douro is prolific. Portugal is actually a major flyway for European migration, and raptors in particular find the ragged cliffs and the crannies of those cliffs to be good for nesting and the hot winds to be good for soaring. So those of you that are bird lovers out there, I think would find the Douro to be quite nice in that regard. So now we're on to the kayaking. Several years ago, I called this trip my favorite float and bloat, and it's kind of stuck. You've just gotten a taste, figuratively, of our wonderful hosts and friends there and their homes and the kind of food and wine, which is just super yummy. But we really got to figure out a way to work some of that off. So, as I said, the float and bloat has stuck, and proudly so. This is the uppermost part of the river journey, and it's actually an international park which forms the border between Spain and Portugal. So Spain is on one side, and Portugal, where this picture is taken, is on the other. As you can imagine, and you can see, the terrain here is truly inspiring. And while you don't see many grapes, you do see old rock terraces built in, and with lots of oranges and almonds and figs and olives. And one of the things that distinguishes the Douro is despite its northern location, it's actually a Mediterranean microclimate. Temperatures soar, midsummer, which is why we don't do the trip in midsummer, up in the 90s and even over 100. And when we're there in June and September, it's delightfully cool in the morning. It's not unusual for me to throw on a light fleece, and then it will warm up to be in the 80s midday. So this is gives you a sense of us paddling in that upper part of the river, where I don't think I've ever seen a boat actually besides our kayaks. And you can see with the rock on the sides there, it's quite gorge-like in several places. As you can see, it's also quite flat, which is not to say the wind never blows. It does. But you don't have to be an expert kayaker or even an experienced kayaker to enjoy it. The first part of the day is spent teaching. I'm actually a certified kayaking instructor, and I love to teach and love to coach, and I'm happy to coach people throughout the week. So the kayaking is not difficult. Gives you another little idea of some more flat, beautiful calm, again, making it perfect for kayaking, the solitude and remote nature of it, as well as the river itself. Paddle from usually about 3 hours a day. There are a couple of days in the beginning are a little bit longer. And depending on the skills of the group, we can, and the energy of the group, we can switch things up as needed to make it comfortable for anybody. We want people to stretch themselves a little bit and have fun kayaking, but we don't want to wear people out too soon. So it's not just good for kayaking. As you can see here, the river at this end is pretty good for cannonballs too. So here I am taking a dip. The river temperatures are very refreshing in June and September. And so the swimming, whether you decide to do a cannonball or not, which I always encourage, is just really terrific up here too. As I said, the river is remarkably clean. As we work our way downriver, it starts to open up a little bit more, and you can really start to see the life among the orchards and the vines. You can see on the little peak on the left side there of Quinta, a little house on the side there, and again, depending on where we are, it's very frequently we'll see little chapels and little old shepherd's houses that are made out of stone, and again, still very much having the river to ourselves. This is a former traveler, Trudy, who's clearly enthused over another day on the river, dying to go. And as you can probably tell from some previous pictures, this is our kayaking attire by day, and we dress up a little bit at night, as is Portuguese custom, and to be respectful of the hosts and where we're staying. And as we work our way downriver, as I said, things start to open up, and you really start to get a sense of all these beautiful terraces and orchards. This is it gives a great perspective, I think, of the terraces and the kind of enormity of this valley. Not just for paddling, but not really for paddling, but for hand picking. You can imagine what it's like with a volume of terraces alone to have to hand pick most of this. And the harvest season actually goes on for about 6 weeks. And this is another one of the beautiful gorges that we paddle through. As you can tell from this picture and the others, we paddle mostly in doubles, although we do have some singles for those wanting to give it a try or are more experienced in a kayak. These doubles that we've purchased are stable and they're comfortable. And within the last 2 years, we've invested in new paddles that are terrifically light and that would make paddling a lot easier and a lot more fun. Finally, we paddle through more than gorges. This is our kayaks in a lock, about to drop down about 100 feet before continuing on downriver, usually with a little current. It's safe to say that this is always a highlight of the trip and pretty exhilarating for people. We don't share the lock with anybody else when we go through, and I dare say we're the only ones that go through in kayaks. So it's a pretty exciting experience. So there you have it. This is the last group, just last month in June, giving a big thumbs up or paddles up at the end of the paddling portion of the journey in Pinhao. You know, in the end, I really believe that Portugal, and most especially this region, is one of the best kept secrets in all of Europe. You know, it's typical, particularly for Americans, to go to Spain and France and Italy, and I've certainly been to all of those places too, and they have a ton to offer. They're beautiful, but there aren't very many that come to Portugal, and I'm confident that these travelers and many others would concur that it's stunningly beautiful, and they would agree that it's one of the best kept secrets as well. So that does it for me. I'm happy to take questions. Thanks very much for listening.
Gosh, thank you, Nancy. I'm ready to pack my bags and go right now. That was terrific. So we've got some good questions here. Let's start with this one about fitness level. How fit does someone need to be to take this trip?
Okay. I would say a good level of fitness is helpful because, as I said, we're paddling between 3 and 5 hours a day, and so we encourage people to work on their fitness some before they go on this trip. That being said, it's challenged by choice, and if someone was not able to paddle all 5 days that we paddle, or wanted to take a break from paddling for a day, it is possible for folks to join Pedro and Vitor on the ground and get a whole different, or for that matter, to chill out at one of the beautiful quintas that we stay at for the day and take a break. So I would encourage fitness, but you don't have to be you don't have to be an athlete, and that last group, I can tell you, one of the couples was 84 and 74, and certainly in good fitness for their age, but nonetheless, obviously older, and it's not unusual for this trip. It's not considered to be intense kayaking.
Okay. And how many days are there paddling versus non-paddling?
There are 5 days total of paddling, and then 4 days without.
All right, great, thanks. And then I think you talked a little bit about hikes. There was a question about how long each of the hikes are and what the vertical distance would be of that.
The vertical distance is actually not that much of a concern. The hikes that we do tend to be more horizontal than vertical, which is to say that there's some up and down through over some dirt roads or through some fields, or in the case of going to see the Paleolithic etchings. We're going up and down a little bit, but we're talking feet as opposed to vertical height, and so most of the hikes, while they can take some time. For instance, there's one hike at the very end of the trip that I do first thing in the morning while we're at Casa de Casal de la Voice before breakfast, and it's basically circumnavigating the very tip of the mountain that the Casa sits on, to get a beautiful view from that height, overlooking the valley for the last time. So, none of the hikes are overly strenuous, and there are walking sticks available where we need them. And again, we can make adjustments if it's difficult for people.
Okay, good. Thanks. Several people are interested to know how the luggage catches up with you. Is it sent ahead while you're paddling?
Exactly. That's why we have such an awesome ground crew. We use Vitor and Pedro are the keepers of our vans and the trailer for the boats. And the paddling is not contiguous, so we'll at certain stops in the river we'll pull the boats out, and then we'll put in at a slightly different place further downriver. And in both cases, whether it's luggage or boat gear, it all goes into the van, and our luggage, which are more or less what's referred to as sag wagons, and the guys do an awesome job of taking care of our luggage, so we don't have to carry anything but some sunscreen and maybe a little chocolate, of course, and water on the kayaks with us.
You've got your priorities straight. I like that. I like that you're carrying chocolate.
Absolutely.
So a couple more questions about the kayaks, and then we'll move on to other questions. There's a question here about whether the boats are sit on top or skirted.
They are not skirted, and they are not set on tops. They are what would be considered to be kind of a hybrid between a sea kayak and a recreational boat. A recreational kayak being kind of a wide open, unskirted, but it still has sort of a deck to it. These are more like sea kayaks, which is to say there are cockpits that people slide into, and that we help people in and out of if they need help. But we do not use skirts. So there's no reason for people to worry about being trapped, if you will, inside the kayak. They're big enough cockpits so that you don't have to worry about that.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Last kayak question, and then we're going to move on to other questions. Are there any rapids on this trip?
There are not any rapids on this trip.
All right.
Because of 5 dams in the Duoro River, the river now is a very placid river.
Okay. All right. So other questions. Is breakfast included at all? Are meals included, wine and alcohol? So maybe you could give us that run through.
All of the above, yes. All of the meals are included. All of the accommodations are included, and all of the wine is included. All of the port is included. So the only thing that is not included in terms of alcohol would be that if somebody decided not to drink wine, or decided not to wanted to partake instead, let's say, of a wee bit of scotch or something like that, then they would be responsible for paying for that. But otherwise, everything is included.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And what about photo gear? How does photo gear do on this trip? Is it feasible for somebody who may be a real photo buff to be able to bring all their gear?
In terms of the camera or lenses, yes. One of the things that we issue to everyone at the beginning of the trip are dry bags, which keeps any clothing, cameras, chocolate dry while it's in the kayak, and it's possible to tuck that dry bag in between, tie it in so that it doesn't get lost, but to tuck it in between your legs in the kayak so that it's available as you go downriver. A tripod would be a little bit more challenging on the kayaks, but again could be strapped into the kayaks, and certainly could be carried in the vans for use at other parts of the trip.
Okay, thanks. So how many people are in the group? Minimum and maximum number?
Well, to the best of my understanding, Natural Habitat really doesn't have a minimum, which is to say they guarantee their trips. So there generally isn't a minimum, but maximum on this trip would be 12. We never take more than 12 because these are the visits that we're making and the relationships that we've established in the quintas and the size of the quintas themselves. Frankly, when we're there, we take the place over. It's ours. It's ours for the duration. So.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we have just about covered it here. Let's see, just a couple more questions here. Oh, the farms. You said the name of the farm with the best lamb meal. Where was it located, and do the farms have sheep for wool?
They do use the sheep for wool as well, and that farm is right in the center, the heart of the trip. Tadeo's farm. It's right smack in the middle of the trip. So they definitely use the. In fact, they use the sheep skins as well. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Last question here. I think people are asking about whether Portugal has good chocolate. I think it's on some people's minds after we had a little comment there about it.
As a matter of fact, I have found some good chocolate in Porto. But that being said, I believe it's chocolate that's imported from Ecuador. So there's a chocolatier in Porto that is using Ecuadorian chocolate to make their goods. So I wouldn't say that chocolate is at the top of the list. There's lots of other good things grown, but in Portugal, but including cork, by the way. Portugal is one of the largest exporters of cork. All those corks that in the wine bottles came right from the same place.
So,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Well, Nancy, I think we've covered all our bases here. The last, so we'll make this the last question, and it's about best time to travel. When is the best time to do this trip?
Okay. Well, as I think I indicated earlier, there are two types of departures. One is June, where we are not in grape harvest, but we enjoy. The mountains are just. I mean, the first time I went there in June, I was blown away because the mountains. You could tell it's a mountainous region, and it's just chock-a-block full of wildflowers. And so it's really stunningly beautiful in its own way. And then the second time that we go is in September. And in fact, we have 3 departures running this September. And my understanding that there's the departure on the 21st of September of this year still has some openings. But September is wine harvest season, and so that's a terrific time to go as well. We've chosen those collar seasons around the summer because, again, it gets awfully hot, like a little petri dish of heat there in the summer, which is one of the reasons why it's so good for wine and grapes and all the other wonderful things that get harvested there. So, either one of those, June or September, ends up being terrific because it's still warm and sunny and dry for the most part, and a great time to travel there.
Terrific. Okay. All right. Well, I think that covers it then, Nancy. I'm going to turn it back over to you for your closing comments.
All right. Well, I just want to thank everybody again for taking the time out of their busy schedules and letting me share a little bit about this trip. As I think I indicated, I'm a pretty passionate paddler, but I'm even more passionate about Portugal. I can't say enough about Portugal or this region, and I hope to have the opportunity to share it with some folks in the near future.
Great. Well,
thanks again for listening.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And for everyone listening, we will have the replay available in just a few days. We'll get an email out to all of you with that link. So with that, we will say good day and conclude our webinar. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.